All right. Just going to give it a moment, and then we'll get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Just give it another moment, and then we'll begin. Okay. Great. All right. Just one more moment, and then we will start. All right, let's do this. All right, holiday metrics unwrapped. Holistic view on seasonality. I'm going to focus a lot more on OTT and linear measurement. Love to talk about this on September 19th. I am in Southern California, so I included this nice winter foreground photo. It's 100 degrees here on most days, so gives me a little bit of warmth, gives me a little bit of holiday cheer. I had something a little bit more apropos, but I definitely moved away from that. So hopefully we can all start thinking about the holiday time. All right, awesome. My name is Jake Thomas. I'm the head of streaming plus sales at Tinuiti. I originally started at Bliss Point Media that got acquired by Tinuiti in 2021. I started on the client strategy and analytics side. So in terms of data analysis, statistics, all of that, that's where I basically got my start. The Streaming Plus division covers OTT and streaming, so CTV as well in there, linear, display, YouTube, and basically all programmatic buying. So that plus sign is doing some heavy lifting these days, let's just say. Great. So just a quick word about Tinuiti. So $4 billion in media managed. We're the largest OTT buyer in terms of an independent performance marketing firm within North America. So we've built that out as time has gone on. We now serve, I believe, around 200 clients. And we're also the largest buyer across the triopoly of Google, Facebook, and Amazon. So you can see the accolades on the right. So a Microsoft Global Agency Partner, Premier Partnership with Meta. We're the only independent agency partner for TikTok. And then when it comes specifically to the Streaming Plus division, we are the only approved vendor right now who can measure Amazon OTT media. So think about that if you're playing on Freevee or Prime Video and soon to be Twitch. If you play on that, typically you do not have the ability to measure to your direct-to-commerce site. However, we've been approved for that first trial run, that alpha. So we're very excited about the ability to buy that media and then also measure it and how that goes against your e-commerce channel. Just as a quick heads up there. Yeah, and then just as a brief follow-up, what we cover, affiliate, display, linear television. I guess the question sometimes is more, what don't we cover? Digital audio as well, anything in terms of deterministic measurement, anything in terms of probabilistic measurement, as well as, of course, brand and awareness plays, trying to mix that brand and performance media plans as we go forward. Great. All right, let's jump in. So I'm going to give the briefest of overviews about the space itself, and then we'll talk a little bit about in terms of holiday. And then for the most part, I will spend a majority of my time focusing a lot on measurements. I think that is where we really cut our teeth, our bread and butter. We tried to really stake in the ground early on from 2014 onward that we can do this the best. Not only that, but how we work within this, how we think about seasonality, and how we work with such great other brands as Rockerbox to really get the holistic measurement of these channels and to make sure that we're measuring it in a way that you can have actionable insights, right? We never want to be a black box. We never want to be grading our own homework. anything that gives us the ability to work with different partners and differentiate this. This is how we go to market here. Great. So first of all, to focus on OTT or streaming. So from 2018 to 2021, OTT viewers grew 37% worldwide. That's really not much of a surprise if you think about cord nevers, those who have never signed up for cable television, especially for the younger age demographics, as well as cord cutters, those who have looked at cable media and just said, I don't want to spend $120 for a lot of channels that I won't effectively use. So these are the people that you'd imagine that are continuing to sign up for such services as Apple TV, Peacock, Hulu, Netflix, just to name a couple. Of course, as well, there's also the free ad-supported tiers. Think about that in terms of Pluto TV and Tubi, as well. Fubo TV, I guess is what I'm thinking there. And then the entire industry is slated to hit about $205 billion in 2023. So continuing to grow, continuing to find opportunities to play more content, become more of an on-demand service, really meet the consumer where they are. To make sure that we can ever find new channels, new niches, really making sure that the consumer has the ability to see whatever they want to watch on whatever channel they want to watch for either a fee or an ad-supported tier that just comes free from them. So this is now mainstream. If you look specifically within the age demographics and what I believe most brands are looking for, streaming TV is really hitting that sweet spot. So that 18 to 34 key demo is mostly where they're living. So, typically when we talk about this live, the median age that we usually arrive at for OTT and streaming TV is roughly 38 years old, while linear TV is usually closer to about 58 years old. That isn't to discount linear television. That's looking at the entirety of the portfolio. Obviously, if you play on something like Comedy Central or MTV on linear television, your median age will not be 58 years old. If it would be, I'd be very impressed about 58-year-olds watching MTV, but you just never know. And then as of very recently, the channel has overtaken linear in terms of total viewership. So this was announced by Nielsen about a week ago, but we're starting to see now the overall adoption as more streaming TV becomes a little bit more mainstream. So of course, Netflix, from sometimes you could think about that as almost as a utility. If you're going to have OTT, you're probably going to have a Netflix subscription. The question in our mind is, what else will you have? Well, you're going to be talking about the new Hulu programming. Is there opportunities for you to watch some shows that you were familiar with when you were younger on Tubi or Pluto TV? Anything of the like that just becomes a little bit more available. A lot of people were talking about Severance a couple of years ago on Apple Television, and I feel like that's what drew my sign up. And now I watch For All Mankind for some reason that I still don't really remember anymore, but it's still good. So you're seeing more of that play out overall. But I do want to mention the death of linear TV has been greatly exaggerated. I don't think we're getting to a point now where people are switching over wholeheartedly. We took a look at this about a year ago in terms of streaming TV as replacement for traditional TV. Yes, that slope is on the uprise, but in terms of streaming being an addition to traditional TV, you can notice that slope is flattening out, that black line right there. So even though streaming and OTT continues to grow, we are not necessarily just seeing as a full-scale replacement, but those are using both. I think what you've seen probably, or if you have paid a little bit more attention to Nielsen reports, is just a lot of metrics about live events, whether that's the Grammys or Oscars, but especially in terms of live sports. You're seeing every year now, it looks like we're getting more and more live sports watchers. College football and football is obviously doing a bunch of heavy lifting. A lot of people are utilizing YouTube TV for the Sunday ticket package, as well as Hulu Live to watch college football or professional games as well. And of course, buying those and bundling it with an OTT service is usually cheaper, sometimes noticeably cheaper than what you see if you're just going to sign up for your typical MVPD cable offering. So you're seeing this now in terms of an additional on-channel for linear television as well as OTT. So it's not just singular one or the other. So no, it's not as much mutually exclusive. That being said, I do want to mention in terms of channel by channel. So we talk a little bit about this with our network partners, and we're trying to make sure that we have the most I don't want to say mutually exclusive channel, but we're just being really well thought out in terms of our media mix, right? If you're going to utilize the multi-touch effect, of course, you want to make sure that you're hitting those people in different areas, different channels, but you want to make sure that you're doing this in almost an incremental fashion. If one audience overlaps completely with the other, now you're just over-indexing in terms of overall impressions that your usage. So anything that just keeps that conversation going, I think, is incredibly helpful here. OTT circle is probably a little bit too big here, but when we talk to our network partners, those who are watching OTT versus linear television on those individual networks, there's usually not much of an overlap. I'm not going to call it mutually exclusive, but those who are watching, say, Food Network via their OTT on demand service, so if they're watching it, say, via Hulu, versus watching it live versus their cable offering, those audiences usually don't intersect as much as you'd ultimately think it is. So it's a good opportunity for you to target those demographics, so those specifically who are looking for food or something in terms of how your audience interacts with people who are looking for food, and finding almost a mutually exclusive, not almost mutually exclusive, but somewhat incremental audience than you'd think about, and something that makes it more affordable for the cost per. Right? Great. Another brief media during Q4. So specifically, we're talking about holidays. So let's go into holiday stuff. Big shocker. Q4 CPMs are expensive. Who knew? Who knew? So if you're looking specifically at non-preemptible and preemptible spot costs, you saw this big in 2021, which makes sense, especially with the growth of digital marketing. Not just that, just e-commerce sales overall, like everything that you effectively saw there. There was a huge increase. A lot of people entered the marketplace, and a lot of people were looking for new customers, especially as retail declined. There was a global pandemic, I'm pretty sure we all remember, that probably played a outsized part in this. So you see in 2022 going into Q4, that pronouncement of CPMs was a little less outsized. So only a 10% growth from Q3 2022 into Q4. This is something that makes sense to us. We've seen this time and time again in terms of overall seasonality. You go into Q4, CPMs increase. There's a lot of retail that wants in, a lot of e-commerce, a lot of gifting, sometimes holiday travel. So now you have brand advertisers going in there and really jacking up the rates. Coca-Cola is going to release something with a bunch of polar bears, so they're going to spend a lot of money in terms of ultimately that. And then the question in our mind is the juice worth the squeeze? If the CPMs are going to come up, and if we're looking at these channels as performance channels, can we back out in terms of cost per acquisition, so any type of CAC, or even ROAS in terms of overall ad share, to make sure that we are hitting those that we're effectively need to be hitting? Q4 is a great time to enter, especially if you're within that realm of retail or gifting or anything like that in terms of the overall season itself. It's just a question in our mind of how can we make the most holistic media plan? So if there is going to be a CPM premium on specific channels or networks or anything like that, that we expect a response rate to grow at that same level. Typically, of course, with going into your seasonality, especially if it is during the holiday season, you will expect that to happen. But then my question, which goes into the meat of this, which is, what is the true incremental impact? How much are we actually using our marketing efforts to get people to convert? Or were they going to just convert anyway? So is there almost a wasted spend? So going into measurement, first I want to talk just really briefly in terms about OTT. The beauty about OTT is that each ad experience is bespoke to an individual alone. So if I am watching, say, The Simpsons on Hulu, and let's say my brother in Hawaii is also watching The Simpsons on Hulu, even if it's at the exact same time, we push play down to the millisecond at the exact same time, we'll both have completely different ad experiences. It's user generated. The fact that I push play meant that I'll get something bespoke just to me and me alone. So when the ad spot hits, it effectively say an ad server is pinged and says it is time to serve Jake an ad. They serve an ad, and then usually what happens is that each one of these ads are amended with an agency pixel, or for us, an Tinuiti pixel. And when that ad plays on my connected TV device, that pixel fires. So when that pixel fires, it collects a rich amount of metadata. Some of these you see here in terms of IP address, user agent string, timestamp down to the millisecond, as well as a mobile ad ID if you're watching it, say, on your phone or through an app. And then what we effectively do is that we use our clients and our advertisers' first-party data to find matches. So we're looking for those who saw the impression on their connected TV device or potentially their mobile device, and then converted through, say, their phones or potentially desktops or laptops, and finding those matches. First, there are 3 things that we need to do to make sure that that matching criteria works so we can actually make that match. First is the identifiers we see on the delivery side. Much match the identifiers we see on the response side. Very, very easy, very one-to-one. Next is that we want to make sure that we are working within a customizable lag window based on the advertiser and their product overall. You know, if you're a high consideration product like a mattress or a life insurance company, you're going to give it a bit of a bigger window. You expect someone who maybe sees your ad is going to do some learning, some discovery. They'll go to your site. They'll think about the product price point. They'll leave. They'll come back to the site. They realize they really want that mattress. And then they overall will make that purchase. So usually that's within, say, 14 or 30 days, especially with that high consideration product. But of course, if you're an app download or some type of clothing, perhaps you want that within 1 to 7 days, right? So if you are an app download and somebody sees your impression on day 1 and then downloads your app on day 30, it's probably not the impression that overall drove them to download that, the one that they saw 30 days ago. And then lastly, and I think most important for this, is the conversions that we're overall seeing, they must be incremental. That is the way that we typically think about it, especially going into seasonality. You're going to see your response rates improve, especially if that is your core seasonality trends during the holiday. But we want to make sure that the incrementality rate makes the most sense in terms of each one of the advertisers that we are working with during these time frames. Before, when we've talked about this in the past, a couple of years ago, if you notice from what I'm talking about here, the matching process is quite it's a correlation, right? So it's a correlative effect that we're looking at those who saw the impression and those who later showed up to our advertiser sites and effectively converted. I think the key for us here, especially in the most recent past, is now we're looking for that causation, right? We really want to, in terms of OTT, as well as linear, that I'll get into a little bit later, we want to make sure that those who overall saw the impression, that was what actually drove them to convert. It wasn't just incidental. They weren't just going to go to the website anyway and make that conversion. They saw the OTT ad, it got them to actually actively consider it, and then they effectively went to the site and converted in the near future. So that is the key for us, especially as we go into Q4 seasonality, when we launch new advertisers looking to take advantage of that holiday season. So we conduct an experiment. So incrementality test, so that's going to measure the true impact of the channel. So that goes back into that causation. And what you are doing here is you are effectively splitting it between 2 distinct groups. The treatment group, which will see your ad. So if I'm a mattress company, again, I'm serving my mattress ads. People will effectively see them and they will visit to my site and hopefully convert. And then we will also have a control group. So those who are not seeing my mattress ads, perhaps seeing something completely different. Maybe it's a PSA, go vote, something like that. Or maybe it's a different ad entirely that we're overall happening. And then you measure the difference in response rates between those 2 groups. So the treatment group are those who just solely saw my ad and then converted at my site. And the control group is solely saw the other ad that I had served, had nothing to do with my product, and then overall converted to my site anyway. So that gives us that incremental discount that we can effectively measure here. Cool. So there's a bunch of different incrementality test options specifically within OTT that I just wanted to talk about first, and then we can go a little bit into linear as well. There's the geo test. This has been around forever, of course. You're looking specifically within geo segments, and you basically do like an effective match market test. Here's some DMAs that are going to see my ad. Here's some DMAs that are not going to see my ad. I have a good sense how these DMAs perform. Let's judge them against each other after we turn this on. Not a bad test in terms of top-line metrics, but I think the beauty of the OTT channel is each one of these impressions is digitally delivered. So you can get a little bit down more in terms of the deterministic measurement if that is something that is more interesting to you, to look at your individual conversions and basically judge those and determine lifetime value, anything like that, so you can get a little bit deeper. That's a little bit more in terms of what we're seeing with the PSA test. So that's an audience holdout test, where effectively you are being served across the entirety of the country your specific ad, so whatever that advertiser's ad is, and then to a different group entirely, you're doing the control ad. So that's the PSA, that's a different ad, just anything that's completely different. And you can measure the difference in response rates and compare those down to the user level. So a little bit less noise down to the actual people that are converting. There's also ghost bidding, which is one of the best ways, I think, to ultimately think about this in terms of programmatically. So effectively what's happening there is that if you win the programmatic bid, even if you win the bid, you should have some DSPs that have the ability to do this. You win the bid, but then your impression is not served. However, the DSP still logs that information for you, so you can measure the response or anything from the viewer that effectively saw that saw, quote unquote, they didn't actually see the ad, but would have, and to see if they would have converted anyway, right? It gives you a good sense of, was that spend going to be wasted since we won that bid, but we didn't serve an ad? And lastly, we have always on incrementality. So you see this a lot with bigger agencies that have a lot of different advertisers, and what you can effectively do at different dimensions at the network level, at the creative level, is compare different response rates. If an agency has two advertisers, advertiser A and advertiser B, and you are advertiser A, you are looking at the response rate from every impression that you serve and then come to your site. And then simultaneously, you could take a look, if you're both playing, say, on Hulu, at advertiser B, who saw every impression that they saw and never saw advertiser A's impression, and then converted on the advertiser A site. In this instance, agencies probably won't be able to pass back those viewership data to you because that's a different advertiser's impression serve, but they can come at an incremental calculation based on those who saw your ad and based on those who didn't see your ad. So that's very important for us, especially as we go into Q4 seasonality around the holiday season. So then the question in my mind is always, well, which ones do you do? Like, you have 4 different options here. What is the best and what is the most holistic to get an understanding of what's happening here? And I would focus on, personally, ghost bidding and always on incrementality. Ghost bidding is nearly perfect for me in terms of, well, we were going to win this anyway, so this is the audience that we're effectively going for. However, we can still measure the response rate of those if they didn't see our ad. So was this something necessary that we would have bought? Always on incrementality is just a switch. So it's easy to just turn on and effectively measure the difference of the channel. But to be very frank here, and especially as we go into holiday season and you want to make sure you have the most bang for your buck, I think also one of the most important reasons for why these two are it's free. Right, so each one of these impressions that are being delivered, it's not going to be quote unquote wasted. Audience holdout tests are fantastic, but of course, I don't think a lot of advertisers, when they are launching into a new channel, want to spend a lot of money on just a PSA test or a advertiser that is not your own impression when you're trying to figure out that overall incrementality. What helps us here in terms of ghost bidding and helps us in terms of what we provide is that each one of those impressions that we're effectively serving is free. There's no additional charge to this. We're still measuring the overall impact, and it's not an additional cost that we are passing back to you that will overall affect your ROAS measurements, your return on investments, your CAC, anything like that. So this is something where, especially during Q4, when you want to load up your impressions, find new channels, really make sure that you're finding those conversions, there's no wasted spend here. Everything is going to those conversions. Cool. So yeah, I briefly mentioned this in terms of always on incrementality. So again, advertisers' impressions are ad 1, other impressions are ad 2. You look at the different response rates, the incrementality coefficient is calculated. So everything that you're getting back from your agency that has the ability to provide this, Tinuiti has the ability to provide this, is an incremental conversion. And then linear. So just briefly about linear spot analysis. So the beauty about linear in my mind, if you think about it even traditionally, if you can think about it compared to every other channel you are on, is that it's a true broadcast medium. By that, I mean, when a linear ad is served, it is served at one time across all devices for the brief moment, whether it's a 30-second, 15-second, or in a rare second, a 60-second. You can measure the short-term impact when that spot is aired, and then no one else sees it ever again. So, of course, on other channels, so if you think about like influencers or you think about YouTube, there is a spike analysis that you need to associate with that, but it's a little bit more long tail. So there's a little bit more with linear, an up and down, so to speak, in terms of the incremental impact. So what's worked for us in the past, we have a machine learning algorithm. We have a US patent that we're very proud of, is understanding that incremental impact based on your advertisers' KPIs, what effectively you're seeing over time. So by that, I mean is that if you have, your typical KPI curve, let's talk about visits, you typically have an expectation of where that response rate is over time. So how that changes in terms of your overall KPI. And then when you turn linear on, that is the true and only broadcast medium. So when a spot airs, we know that spot down to the millisecond based on the post logs that we're overall receiving. And then we can look at those changes in a very micro fashion based on when that happens. So the two faded logos that you see here. So think about that in terms of email marketing. So life cycle on the right, TikTok to the left. That's going to see people a little bit differently. That's going to reach people differently. But if the spot airs on, say, NBC, which is the two in the middle, we expect that change from that dotted line. So that delta between the dotted line to the top solid line is effectively the impact that we're seeing by that channel. So the way that we see linear from this and measuring how this changes over time and the change of our daily KPI counts is this is a true incremental channel to us. Now, if you want to do a match market test, so that geo test, we can do something like that. I think that has the ability you can buy within specific spots, whether it's DMAs or states or what have you, to measure the change between that. But that is noticeably expensive and goes back to my previous slide where it's not necessarily free. So we don't really recommend that, especially during the holiday season. That, and especially during the holiday season as well, you want to be national for the most part. If you are a national product that can ship anywhere or anything like that, you want to make sure that you're covering all of your ground here. So that is our last thought here. I just want to move through this. So everything I've talked about here to the left is that incrementality experiments, how we overall use that, how we see the difference between the test and control in terms of overall measurement. And we want to feed that into marketing mix modeling so you understand that holistic view of not just our channels, the OTT and linear in this case, but everything. What is the true incremental impact, which is something that is incredibly important as we go into the holiday season. And that is why you use great vendors such as Rockerbox. So they can analyze all of your marketing. They can ingest everything in terms of your overall spend and impressions on your different channels. You have a good understanding of how this changes over time. And this is something that, as I said off the top, we truly believe in. We truly believe in working with different vendors to make sure that you are understanding the holistic effects of our channels, that halo effect, that incremental effect, anything like that that really helps build this overall out. Because as I mentioned off the top, we never want to grade our own homework. This is something where we want you to come to this conclusions that we are showing you. And if you disagree, that is of course completely fine. We want to understand why that is. We want to give you all the data that you can effectively have. And so when I mention that, I also say that for streaming video and streaming audio, so think about that in terms of podcasts and the dynamic impression delivery, we can provide you a daily log of those impressions down to the millisecond, of course, as well as a matched responses. So those who saw those impressions and then overall converted on your site. And on the linear side, we can do twofold. One is we can give you the post log, so when your impressions or when your spots actually aired, and then a micro attribution report, which gives you a probability that linear was the driving mechanism to brought these users to your overall site. We think that's helpful because linear by definition is a probabilistic medium. That is how you effectively measure this. So if you can measure that down to the user level, that is incredibly helpful. And so the last thing I want to mention is, especially with us in Tinuiti, campaign optimization, brand and performance strategy, data transparency, and as we continue to move towards maybe a little bit more of a signal-less future, experimental design. So always the ability to provide this on so we can make as many different optimizations, understand the true impact, and really just understand how marketing is influencing your holiday season. Cool, he said. All right, there's like 1 minute left. So if anyone has any questions, that would be great. If not, that is, of course, completely understandable and fair as well. But I hope this was helpful. All right. Get the Slack. Oh, I have several minutes questions. So I will be here. If you need me, please. I'm more than happy to answer any questions, anything that would be helpful. I'm not going anywhere. But thank you all so much for your time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jake. And like Jake said, if you guys do have any questions, just drop them in. But if not, I just wanted to thank you so much. And thank you to Tinuiti and Bliss Point Media for joining us today. I think this session was really valuable. I specifically found it really interesting when you were talking about like around the holidays, if you do have the ability to like ship your, if you're selling a good, and you have the ability to ship nationally, like around the holidays, like that is definitely the play. And I don't think we talk about that very much, right? Like we talk about like what geos are the best, but during the holidays, maybe tapping into some of those like lesser known geos is a good strategy and approach here. So I thought that was really interesting. I also really appreciated your kind of the way that you told the story around incrementality and MMM together, because I think that, you know, we spend a lot of time talking about like a diversified approach to measurement and like which methodologies are best for what. And it's interesting when we're thinking about OTT and linear and kind of how do we make the best decisions in measuring those channels. And I think that marriage was really unique and interesting.
Awesome. Thank you. I see a question in the chat. When it comes to the extended impact of OTT, how do you control for other media ads in your measurement? So I think the power for us in this one is that since we are collecting the first party data and we can effectively make those matches. So by that, I mean, you know, we also have a good sense of the UTM sources, campaigns, anything that comes into the UTMs or the refer path. We can still measure those that are making those effective conversions through that media. And then on top of that, I think, which is also very helpful, is even if we don't get that path, the hope, of course, and the expectation if you're serving a lot of these OTT ads is that those who are seeing your treatment overall washes out with those who are seeing the control, right? So if you're serving a lot of different, say, you know, YouTube ads or something like that, and people are converting outside of like the YouTube bid stream, so it's not connected to by Google or anything like that, you would expect the same change in terms of your treatment and your control group who are effectively seeing both of those ads. So your absolute incremental factor should not be affected, right? So maybe your control group goes ad because their response rate goes up slightly because they saw that YouTube ad. But then also, of course, your treatment group will go up slightly because there's a good probability that they also saw that as well. The hope is that that would get washed out so you can have the true incremental impact of the OTT channel in this space. Cool. Do we see more DTC? I'm assuming everyone can read this. Do I have to read these? All right. Do we see more DTC brands in OTT compared to established CPG brands? So far, yes. I would definitely say so. I think CPG right now is very heavy in terms of linear television. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's worked from them since, you know, TVs were invented. I think that's something that they're completely looking for. I think a lot of CPG brands are looking for the traditional measurements on viewership in terms of, you know, GRPs, TRPs, reach and frequency. This is something, especially the GRPs and TRPs, which are becoming more available in terms of OTT. But I think right now, just in terms of, you know, not just the measurement infrastructure on a performance lens, but also the way that you can flexibly target, you know, understand the bid stream, be a little bit more nimble and dynamic. I think you're seeing a little bit more D2C brands in OTT for the time being. Right.
All right. A couple of really good questions there. Looks like they are slowing down.
Okay.
Yeah, but thank you so much, Jake. This was great. Everyone, we have another session starting at the top of the next hour. I got a preview of this conversation the other day, and I think it's going to be a really good one. And if you have no idea what the Q5 effect is, or have never heard someone talk about Q5, then you'll need to join to hear what it's all about. I think we've mentioned before, you know, people can still register if they want to for these sessions. We'll be going until about 6 today. And there's your registration link if you want to share that with your colleagues. Otherwise, we will see you in the next session. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.